You're listening to the Morphology Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Morphology Podcast. I'm your host, Kathy, aka Murph, and I'm here to share with you interviews about biking experiences from bicyclists who have pedaled to amazing places within the United States. Each week, we will get to know new people and explore great destinations to ride your bike. As you listen to these great adventures cyclists share, you may wonder, why haven't I done that yet? Well, all right, on the show today, we have Dieter Drake. Hey, Dieter.
Hey, Kathy, how are you?
I'm really good. So, Dieter, I'm super excited to have you on the show this week because people who listen to this podcast are probably sick of me talking about an event that happens here in Iowa called RAGBRAI, and you are the new RAGBRAI director.
Yes, I am. Here I am in Des Moines, loving
Yeah,
it.
so
Every day's been an adventure so far. So really excited to be here.
Awesome. Congratulations on the new gig.
Thank you.
Yeah, how would you say things are progressing so far?
Man, it's been going very well. So many people across the state and certainly the cycling community has really come together to make me feel welcome, and that is very, very nice. And when they say Iowa nice, it's a real thing. And I try to explain this to other people around the country, certainly in Colorado. It's a real thing. People are really into this ride, yes, but they love, they're passionate about bicycling and they're passionate about Iowa. So
Right.
that's been a real nice thing.
Right. And it's hard to meet a crabby person when talking about bicycles.
That's so true.
You know what I mean?
That's
Everybody,
so true.
most people smile when they're on their bike and, they love talking about bikes. So I'm hoping that that's what you're interacting with as well.
Every day.
Yeah.
It's been really great.
Yeah. Well, we are recording this at the end of January, and we're lucky enough to have the route announced this past weekend. So I do want to talk about that. I think I'll wait till the end of the podcast when we talk a little bit more about RAGBRAI, but it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like a kickoff of biking season for a lot of people who do RAGBRAI. Once that announcement happens, they know where they're going to be in July, and they already start thinking about like, oh, where am I going to camp and how am I going to get my training miles in? And even though it's freezing cold and snowing outside, I think this is kind of like the kickoff.
It sure is. I saw a whole lot of cell phones out at the route announcement party as I announced the different towns, the 8 different towns. A lot of people on Priceline.com and Booking.com and probably booking with charters and things like that.
Sure.
as I was announcing it. So it's really exciting. It's an exciting time. January, yeah, it's the default start of the cycling season. I know there's a bunch of rides coming up this weekend and throughout the spring. So yeah, it develops into one giant crescendo across Iowa in July.
I'm excited for it, as everyone knows that listen to this podcast because I talk about it all the time. But anyway, well, you mentioned Colorado when we first started talking. And so I'm assuming that you have taken residence in Colorado at some point in your life.
I have, yes.
And maybe kind of
in Colorado.
Yeah.
Here's the story. We ended up out there in 2016 for a business opportunity and a change of pace, really more than anything else. We've spent probably 15 years or so in upstate New York. And that's where my wife and I are from, but we decided upstate New York was nice, but we wanted to change, and we had an opportunity to actually follow our oldest son out to Colorado. So that's what we did, and Colorado is just a wonderful place. It's different. It's definitely different than the Northeast, definitely different than Iowa, but we're very much looking forward to moving to Iowa here in the next year or so as a family. Yeah.
Of course, Colorado, you think of mountains, but what is the bicycling like there?
It's very nice. We see the mountains. We don't actually go into the mountains all that much. We live on the Front Range, so the Rocky Mountains kind of start maybe 10 miles to our west, and we see them pretty much every day, which is a nice backdrop, obviously, to sunsets and things. But where we are on the Front Range, it's very much a high desert. So we live just outside of Colorado Springs in a little area called Black Forest, and we go riding. We typically go east. We go towards Kansas and Nebraska and Iowa. Right, so it's rolling gravel. It's some pavement, but mostly a lot of gravel roads and beautiful scenery.
Oh, awesome! Any places come to mind, like favorite places to ride, or a couple of cool places that you've been on your bike?
Oh, sure. I've been around a few places. I do love the Northeast. The Northeast is a beautiful place to ride. I have not had the experience to ride in Iowa yet, but you talked about the weather. I'm watching the snow drip over my office window here, so I'm hoping that's a sign of spring. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? But I'm hoping to do that pretty soon. But Colorado's a beautiful place to ride a bike. Upstate New York, where I'm from. Washington County, New York, which is where we started event production back there back in 2004. It's a very, very nice place to ride a bike. Lots of roads, rolling farmland,
Mm-hmm.
and low population density, and that's also a beautiful place to ride as well.
Sure. And once we have the ice gone and you can get your wheels down here in Iowa, you mentioned gravel. I'm sure that we have hundreds and thousands of miles of gravel here in Iowa.
I am so very much looking forward to that. So
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk back in history before gravel and before RAGBRAI. You were a elite level cyclist. Is that true?
Ooh, long time ago. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that world.
Yeah, I started bicycle racing as a beginner, basically in 1999, down in Greenville, South Carolina. I was
Hmm.
working down there, and Greenville, as you probably know, is or you may or may not know, it's a mecca for bicycling. They've got a number of events and rides down there. So I started racing bicycles, not too far from my house, actually,
Hmm.
the Donaldson Center. Still very popular place to ride your bike, and they had upwards of 200 and 250 riders on a Tuesday night every week. So I raced there, and then my wife and I decided to move back up to New York, where we're both from at that time. And in about 2001, I kind of moved through the ranks after that with some great leaders and mentors in that area to kind of help me through that. And I was probably 30 at that time, so I got into it late after having a couple of kids at that time.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I, we had a little bit of time to, as you know, bicycling training for a bicycle race takes quite a bit of time. So I had the time at that time to sneak out in the mornings and maybe in the evenings to go out and ride and race bicycles on the weekend. So yeah, I ended up doing fairly well at that level, and I raced through about 2010 or 11,
Mm-hmm.
and I eventually got to the elite level in the upstate New York area. Yeah.
Interesting. Like, what is racing like at that level? I mean, are you like Tour de France, where you're just
No.
never
Yeah.
putting the brakes on? You're just going to go around the corner, whether you're going
Oh yeah.
20
There's a
or
lot of
30
that.
miles an
Yeah.
hour?
I can never claim that I was ever even approaching a professional class rider, and that's a different class
Sure.
entirely. But yeah, it's bicycle racing it takes a little bit a little bit of insanity, I think, to kind of take those turns at 35, 40 miles an hour with
Yeah.
a little bit of pavement under you. I was fortunate enough to race some criterium races at that level down in New York City, and also out in New York. It's a really a different world. It's very, very competitive, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
kind of cutthroat, and racing bicycles downhill at 50, 60 miles an hour is not for everybody, obviously. And I got to the point where I wanted to get up and work on Monday. I saw some of the crashes that I didn't want to be part of. As a father, I didn't want to have to do that any longer. So when I got to about age 38, 39, that was kind of late for me, obviously. I decided, that was enough bicycle racing. I want to go out and enjoy
Yeah.
riding bicycles with my kids rather than crashing on a corner somewhere. Yep.
Right, right.
Yep.
So then you, at least from what I've read, you pretty much switched gears. So you went from,
I did. Yeah.
attending races and being part of races to actually producing them yourself, which I think is such a cool change of pace. Cycling event producer is what I keep seeing. And you
Yep.
founded a company, I think it's called Anthem Sports Tours. Is that correct?
Yeah, it actually, a lot of that happened concurrently.
Oh,
I was racing through the 2000s, and about 2004 I decided I wanted to organize events as well. And yeah, we created a company called Anthem Sports, in the Anthem Sports Events at that time, and we started with a small little race in my hometown. Well, not my hometown, but the town that we ended up living in when we moved back to New York back in 2001. A little town called Cambridge, New York, population maybe 1,200 on the
hmm.
4th of July. It's a very, very small town, but we started with an event called the Balloon Festival Classic right there. It was a bicycle race wrapped around a balloon festival, longstanding balloon festival, and that was a lot of fun and exciting, and it added a different flavor to bicycle racing at that time,
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of bicycle races, and I think this probably still happens. A lot of bicycle races kind of happen in the middle of nowhere, where there's no festival or anything like that. And I thought maybe it's probably a good idea to kind of bring those things together to bring more engagement, certainly local engagement, but more families to bicycling.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of the mission back in 2004, and that did well for a couple of years. Actually, the next year we started an event called the Tour. Actually, at that time it was called the Battenkill Roubaix. and that's the event that kind of took off and ended up being what launched our company soon after. So
Okay.
it's so that happened through the 2000s, and then that was another contributing factor for me not wanting to race bicycles anymore. That actually took over our lives. It was a fairly large endeavor.
Yeah, and when you mention, your tiny town, how do you get people to come race there when they probably don't even know where it is on a map?
Yeah, a lot of sales and a lot of marketing and a lot of just engagement,
Mm-hmm.
and places where people ride bicycles. And Cambridge, New York is probably 3 hours north of New York City. It's about the same west of Boston, about 2 hours south of Montreal, and Philadelphia is about 4 or 5 hours away. So we are situated in a really, really great spot.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned before, Washington County and Cambridge is one of the world's greatest places to ride a bicycle. There's no question about it. The number of roads, paved roads, and also gravel roads in that area, when you contrast that with the population density, it's sometimes you would never see cars on a training ride. You go for 2 or 3 hours, you never see anybody.
Oh, nice.
But the landscape is just beautiful. So we were situated in a great spot. And I think at that time, again, it was very lucky on our part that we got it at the right time, where Lance Armstrong was coming up through the Tour de France, and bicycle racing was really taking off at that
Mm-hmm.
time, and people were looking to do something interesting, and there were more people riding bicycles, racing bicycles at that time. And we just, we got very, very lucky and very fortunate to be able to be in the right spot at the right time for all of that. But we had, I had a passion for it, like I mentioned, bringing people, not just bicyclists, but people to bicycling to see it,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they'll try it in the future, that kind of thing. So that was kind of the mission, to kind of get people to be interested in the sport. Maybe they didn't ride bicycles, but maybe they would, or maybe they would support bicycling,
Mm-hmm.
just by the fact of having a big bicycle race in a small town. Again, we were very fortunate to be where we were at the time.
A quick interruption to tell you this week's podcast is sponsored by Lizard Lips Lip Balm. These great lip balms contain natural ingredients, come in a variety of flavors, and you can choose certified organic or balms with sun protection. Check it out at lizardlips.net. Now back to the show. And it sounds like at some point you moved from competitive to non-competitive events.
Right.
How did that transition happen?
Right. So through the early 2010s, the Tour of the Battenkill and we ended up producing at one point probably 20 events a year through say 2014. And through that time period, the Tour of the Battenkill grew very, very large. Ended up being the largest sanctioned bicycle race in U.S. history, amateur race. We had about 3,400 racers from. We had 47 states and 20 some odd countries represented, and that included a international men's professional race a couple of years as well. So that happened, and again, 2012 or 13 kind of hit, and the whole Lance Armstrong thing kind of put a damper on a lot of bicycling, and the demographic, not just that, and I don't mean to throw Lance under the bus, but the demographic changed, and I think at that time there was more interest in non-competitive bicycling events like RAGBRAI, honestly, but on a smaller scale, all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we saw the racing community crowd shrink a little bit, and we thought, okay, we need to start embracing more people that just own a bicycle. They don't want to race bicycle. They might be too intimidated about doing that. So we switched over a little bit, and there were a couple of transition years where we had both. We had, for the Tour of the Battenkill and other events, we had racing and just riding.
Mm-hmm.
Then we eventually switched over completely to just amateur bicycle rides, really mostly non-competitive kind of rides, recreational Grand Fondo type events at about 2015 or 16. And that's where we've been ever since.
And two rides that I noticed was Tour of the Catskills and Tour of the Battenkill.
Right.
Do those still exist?
Yes, they do. The Tour of the Battenkill, like I mentioned, ended up being the largest race in the history of the U.S., and that switched over completely to a mass start Grand Fondo style gravel. It's about 25-30% gravel on that, and so that's still going, and they're I've handed that off, but they're looking at their 16th annual coming up in May, just the day before Mother's Day. So it's on May 9th. And the registration apparently is up for that, so we're excited to hear that. And then also the Tour of the Catskills is it's a much smaller event, but that was another race that switched over to be more of a Grand Fondo style ride in about 2016 or so, and that's still ongoing as well in August in upstate New York as well.
Okay. And you mentioned you do other events, or you take people. Name a couple of amazing places you've taken your
Uh,
clients.
oh yeah, so before RAGBRAI, I started a company called Anthem Sports Tours, more of a division of Anthem Sports, obviously. But my wife and I decided we wanted to explore the world a little bit and kind of capture the beauty of bicycling around the world. So in southern Chile was one of the places that we said, oh, this seems like a really great place to ride a bicycle. And also the tourism infrastructure was improving every year down there. We were intrigued by that. So my father and I actually went on kind of a recon trip down there in 2015. He's a retired Spanish teacher, so that helped quite a bit.
Ooh.
I didn't remember too much of my Spanish from high school. So I said, Dad, you got to come down and help me out with this. I don't want to get stuck. I don't get stuck in the airport somewhere not knowing how to call a taxi, kind of thing. So he came down. He was really nice, and we spent about a week driving around southern Chile and discovered very quickly that that's just an absolutely fabulous place to visit. So we've been going down there principally for the last, since 2015. We took our first tour down there in 16, and just this past winter we went down for a week as well. And that's by far the most fabulous place to ride a bicycle that I've experienced outside of the U.S. It's just absolutely. The people are very warm. The scenery is incredible. And it's not as hilly as people think. It's more rolling terrain along the Andes Mountains, and again, very much like Iowa and very much like upstate New York. And it's but the people all speak Spanish. That's really the only difference. So that's for sure. That's the most exotic place that I've ridden a bicycle. Although I have been to a couple other places, but we're pretty much set on southern Chile these days.
Mm-hmm. And the photographs I've seen
right.
back up exactly what you said. Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, amazing scenery.
It is very beautiful. Again, very fortunate to be able to go do that once or twice a year. It's a great place to ride a bicycle.
Sure. So when you talk about your touring company, give us a little idea of what that's about. Like, how big are your tours, or where do you go, or are they multi-day, I'm assuming?
Yeah, they're all multi-day. They go from basically lake to lake along the lakes region in southern Chile, again at the base of the Andes and way south, just north of Patagonia. So Patagonia is where there's no more roads. We're just north of there in the lakes region. And we go from hotel to hotel that are situated along the lakes, the volcanic lakes along the base of the Andes. And we kind of see the scenery in between. And there's a couple of opportunities to climb up a volcano if you want, either via car, or you can ride up actually one of them further south that we end up on the Friday each year of the tour. It's just a fabulous place. I mean, you talked about the size. Maybe 6 or 8 people max, so very, very small, very intimate, and we get to be able to experience that culture, which a lot of people embrace after going there once. It's really a great place to ride a bike and see people and see the scenery.
Oh yeah, and it's a great excuse for you to get to go multiple times.
Yeah, exactly right. So I get to sneak down there once a year, so it's a lot of fun.
A quick interruption to tell you this week's sponsor is Thirsty Pigs, a full-service mobile event company offering beer, wine, spirits, plus catering for any event. With over 18 years of experience, this team can do it all. Find out more at thirstypigs.com. Well, speaking of tours, let's talk about RAGBRAI.
All right.
First of all, what's your take on, what is RAGBRAI to you?
It's America's greatest bicycle ride. I'm convinced of that. Yeah, sure. That needs to be a tagline somewhere. I'm trying to talk to our marketing people to kind of embrace that.
There you go.
It really is that. And I think what happens sometimes with people, and I've been this way too with my events, you kind of forget how great of an impact, and not that my events were as nearly as impactful as RAGBRAI. Mm-hmm. But man, this is one of those events and one of those rides where indescribable. The impact that it has, not only locally with the towns and with the bicycling community here, shops started, all of that. But outside of Iowa, people inside of Iowa may not realize the impact that this ride has on the bicycling community worldwide. Mm-hmm. So it means that to me. It's America's greatest bicycle ride. It's about small towns. It's about apple pies. It's about beer. It's about having fun on bicycles and being a little silly for a week. But it's really an amazing ride that I've never been a part of anything like it. So every day is an adventure, and it's been just fabulous.
Yeah, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity that you get to do every year if you want, where your only objective of the day is to get on your bike and ride. Like you don't have to worry about anything else. Like
that's exactly right.
As a registered rider, your gear's transferred for you. They have a campground for you. All you have to do is wake up, have a little caffeine or something, ride your bike
Right.
all day, and then camp, and then do it again the next day. It's
Do
just
it
an
again. Yeah.
amazing experience. So
7 or 8 days in a row. It's just amazing. Yeah. You captured it exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And for those who don't know, basically it's a 7-day bike ride that starts on the west side of Iowa and ends up on the east side of Iowa. And each year the route is different, which is another exciting part about, I mentioned that the route was just announced. So, some tours, it's the same thing every year, which is great. Then you know what you're expecting. But this one is amazing because it's different every year, but yet it's still the small town Iowa hospitality. So,
Exactly.
how many people attend RAGBRAI?
Boy, probably the last dozen or 12, 13 years, it's been 10,000 or more officially each day. Those are the week-long riders, and then
Mm-hmm.
as you probably know, we do one-day passes as well. So there have been times where we've had in excess of 10,000 on the road at any given time, which I don't think there are too many events. It's times 7 days. It's I don't think there are too many rides around the U.S. that can approach that. It's just a mass of humanity and bicycles enjoying Iowa.
It is amazing, and there's minimal, vehicle traffic. So it's not like people who have never seen it are like, "What? How do you get
Right.
10,000 bikes from one place to the next?" But you have 40 to 70 or even up to 100 miles to do it. So everyone gets
Right.
pretty spread out. You've got your people who are trying to go as fast as possible, and then you've got your people who take all 12 hours to get to, the destination.
Sure, yeah, and each town it's kind of an organic kind of a rolling start, as you know. So people start as they get done with their coffee or their breakfast in town, whatever town they're in, and then they follow the prescribed route and a bunch of festivities along the way, obviously, and then we have some meeting towns and pass through towns that we go through, and each one of those are festivals in and of themselves, and then we
Mm-hmm.
get to the end town 40, 60, 80 miles later, and we do have fun all over again from 6 to 10 o'clock at night if you want. It's just there's nothing that compares to RAGBRAI.
Yeah. And this year will be, so this is a 48th year for
Correct.
this
Yep.
event. So
hmm
definitely I would call it a tradition. I mean, people,
I think they're here to stay. Yeah.
yeah. So what can riders expect this year?
Well, we've got a great route, as you mentioned. We announced that this past Saturday, and really 8 towns across Iowa from the west, starting in Lamar's,
Mm-hmm.
and we end up at the Mississippi River, as we always do, at the Mississippi River in a little town called Clinton this year.
Mm-hmm.
And Clinton, both towns, the bookends of this ride are just fabulous places. Both have wonderful people, and they're very, very, very engaged and very excited to be on the route this year. I know, for example, Lamar's is the ice cream capital of the world, so there really
Ooh.
wasn't that hard for me to select Lamar's. I'm an ice cream fan, so I think it was pretty much a no-brainer when I decided to take this role on, and then started to design the route back in December with the help of a bunch of people. And I looked at Lamar's and ended up driving through there not long ago with my son on a recon,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw ice cream cones all over town. I
Oh,
said, "Boy,
nice.
there's no way we cannot go here." Said to my son. So that's where we ended up, and then 7 days later, we're going to end up in a little town called Clinton, right on the Mississippi, and they've revitalized their waterfront. They've got a great new waterfront with docks and kind of a levee. It's really a beautiful place to end the ride,
Mm-hmm.
and so many of the other great towns, I can name them, but I can know some of the other towns in between are just going to be fabulous stops each day.
Oh, yeah. And obviously, you've only been in your vehicle on the route so far because of, the weather, and it's
Right,
only
right.
January right now. But any ideas on elevation? Like, is it going to be a hilly route, or is it going to be do you know yet?
Yeah, I do. I think I know it's about 420 miles, and I think, as I remember, it's probably about 11,000 feet or 10, just over 10, between 10 and 11,000 feet total
Okay.
climbing.
So
So,
over
which is
that 8
pretty
days. Mm-hmm.
reasonable. Yeah,
Sure.
over that 8 days. So it's no single epic climbing day. The longest day is going to be the Waterloo to Anamosa
Hmm.
day, and that's an 85-mile day, and that will include the optional Karis Loop. It's another 15 or so miles to get you over 100 miles to make it a century for that day. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a tradition with RAGBRAI.
Mm-hmm.
So about 12,000, about 11,000 feet of climbing or so. I'm looking at it right now. So
Okay. So over the course of many days, that doesn't sound too bad. I think I
no,
can
yeah.
handle that.
Yeah. Then you'll have a tailwind, as I understand it, west to east, in Iowa. The wind's blowing that direction, so we'll have a little push. And again, there's 10 or 15,000 other people out there to encourage you each day, so nobody gets left behind.
Yeah. The wind always makes me laugh because it truly doesn't matter because you're out there no matter what, like if you have a
Right.
headwind or a tailwind, but it always seems to be a little bit of a headwind, no matter
Okay.
what time of year or what day it is.
Right.
Maybe that's just a mind game that I'm working through.
Yeah, you need to act like a bicycle racer in those situations
Oh,
and
geez, yeah.
duck behind a bunch of people and let them break the wind for you.
Yeah. Well, I always ride self-contained, so that's probably
Oh,
part of
good.
my problem, having 80 pounds of gear on my bike.
Right. Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
A quick interruption to tell you this week's sponsor is Thirsty Pigs, a full-service mobile event company offering beer, wine, spirits, plus catering for any event. With over 18 years of experience, this team can do it all. Find out more at thirstypigs.com. Well, what would you say, okay, so route's been announced. You have done your work figuring out which towns we'll be going to. But now what happens? Like, what goes into planning such a big event?
Oh, it's funny you should mention that. Just last night, probably 10 o'clock at night, I finally finalized the town meeting schedule. So there's just a series of probably 40, 50 meetings at each of these towns that are participating. Not only the overnight towns, and those are probably the most important, but there are meeting towns and other pass-through towns that we just happen to go through.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And there's lots of logistics involved with those folks. So yeah, it's meetings and going to meet these people. Again, before we announced the route, I had some involvement directly with each of the town leaders, but I didn't want to tip my hand, obviously, and say, hey, we're definitely coming to whichever town,
Right.
because it is an exciting thing to announce it as a surprise. So now that it's all out in the open, everybody knows, I've got to go meet with these folks and make sure that they're planning, they're developing their committees, and kind of making it a cohesive ride and consistent across the state, so we can bring a level of excitement and enthusiasm to those towns to make sure that they're getting their bang for their buck as well. I mean, that's part of it too. But yeah, so that's the plan, is to go see these towns and meet with the state patrol, for example. Care Ambulance has been a great supporter. We're meeting with them, bring them involved, and make sure that again, everything's in place and ready to go for July.
Mm-hmm. Any challenges that you think may pop up or you expect to pop up?
Some of the towns, and challenges are good things. I love challenges, but
Sure.
some of the towns haven't done it for a number of years, and the people have changed since then. So that could be a challenge. And in fact, I'm sure it will be. Some of the towns have done it as recently as 4 or 5 years ago. So I think they're doing a lot of copying and pasting from that time. So that's probably the challenge. And again, I like challenges, so I think that would be a great opportunity to kind of re-energize those particular towns to be a part of this great American bicycle ride.
Sure. And, something that maybe people don't think about as they're biking through these towns is that as we come through in our big swarm, we may be doubling or tripling the population of that town.
Keep on going, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. And you're right, even more. And so these towns have to go from one bar with 5 bar stools to 5,000 people possibly going through and coming in and having a beer. Or a lot of people go to the post office to get postcards or to get their passport stamped. Just dealing with people, the volume of people is just kind of mind-blowing. Or where does everybody go to the bathroom? Like, you've got to have porta potties everywhere. I don't know. It's just, if you really sit and think about it, and this is from my perspective as a rider, I know you are doing it. You have, probably a big old binder that tells you with this volume of people, you need this many porta potties or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, it can be overwhelming, and that's a challenge, I think, to make sure that people in those particular communities know what to expect, and the communication between us and them is done well in advance, so there's hopefully no mysteries by the time they get to ride day. That's a really important thing, and again, that's very very similar to what I did back east in these tiny little town called Cambridge. We put 10 or 15,000 people through that town in a day or two, and that was overwhelming to a lot of people. They just didn't know what to expect sometimes. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is to get those smaller towns kind of up to speed as to what we're doing, and then hopefully they can develop their local resource and infrastructure to be able to pull it off successfully and hopefully advertise their towns. I mean, some of these small towns have some great local resources. And it's an opportunity for economic development, obviously in those little smaller towns, if only for a day. But it's also an opportunity to advertise some of the other resources and other events perhaps they have other times of the year. So we're kind of that's one of the missions that I have for developing the relationships with those small towns, is to get them to be able to advertise what other resources they have in town. And maybe we're coming in on a day in July, but maybe there's a fall festival that they would like some people to come back to. So we're hoping to engage those towns to kind of bring those resources to the forefront so we can advertise them appropriately.
Right, right. And you look at, the registered riders.
Right.
Give us an idea of what they are getting for their week-long rider fee.
Right. So it's the camping you mentioned, and they get the ride support. So they get the luggage transfer, as you probably know. We've got a couple of semi-trailers that we haul all the luggage for all the registered riders from town to town each night. They get so they get that, and that's a big deal, obviously. So that things hopefully, and as I understand it, have shown up on time every time.
Oh yeah, well-oiled machine.
Well,
Yeah.
machine yard. We met with our some crew members from last year a couple days ago, and they were describing some of the details and some of that. I was just blown away by the logistics and the level of work that they had to exert to pull all that off. But they pull it off. 48. This will be 48 years in a row.
Yeah.
So they get that. They get the ride support, obviously, on the road. We get the support of the State Patrol this year again. And those folks have been tremendous, and they'll usher us through the more critical intersections on the ride. Obviously, EMS support, that's a really important thing. I hate to mention it, but it's a really important piece in this to make sure nobody's left stranded with injuries and things like that. So we've got the support of Carry Ambulance again, which is really a great thing, great asset to the ride, obviously. And they do a lot of local transports as they're needed, and treating the road rash and things like that invariably happens with bicycle rides. So there's that. They get obviously the wristband gets you into all the free concerts every single night, and we're looking at some pretty darn good bands this year again, not least of which is the band that we're hoping to get in Lamar's for the RAGBRAI Expo the first night. And I can't tell you who it is, but we're looking at doing a big one. So. And that'll be a lot of fun. I'm gonna spill that on Lamar's here this week and see what their thoughts are, because it's really their town. We want to make sure we're doing the right thing as well. So
yeah.
So there's that. They get again all the craziness in between too. It's just it's a great ride, and everybody gets to enjoy the camaraderie of 10 or 15,000 other cyclists out on the road at any given time. So
yeah. And if you're not that you would ever be super super fast or super super slow, but something that I always think about, there are literally route markers like every quarter mile or even less sometimes that are telling you where to go, and you sometimes you like have to think about like, how did those signs get up on that pole?
Oh, that's a whole different story there.
That's got to be a full-time job for somebody in itself.
It is. We've got a handful of crew members, and I call it the crew. It's the RAGBRAI crew, and it's 40 or 50 people that help out with the ride every year. And some of them have been doing it for decades now. But there is a crew, part of the crew that does route marking, and they're out at 2-3 in the morning, a day in advance sometimes, making sure all those signs are out in the right spots, and sometimes they'll double back to make sure they haven't disappeared in the middle of the night or got blown over. So that's an undertaking in and of itself. And so some of these people, like I mentioned, have been doing this for decades.
Yeah.
And just fabulous, warm people that just want this ride to be successful.
Oh, yeah. Well, we should probably tell everybody about important dates, costs, etc. Just because I'm sure at this point everyone's all pumped up to be part of RAGBRAI.
Right. So obviously we get a big spike in registration, which we're seeing now after the route. Everybody wants to know where the route is going, and we've got some great towns like I mentioned. So the route is kind of a sort of northwestish to southeastish sort of a route this year. So that's exciting. So the important date's obviously April 1st, and that's no joke. We closed the lottery for the week-long passes. So that's your opportunity to get in on the week-long passes that include all the luggage transfer and all that other stuff that I mentioned. And that's $175. So that's exciting. Which I think, boy, coming in, that's a great price point for a bicycle ride that lasts 7 days. Yeah. I mean, there aren't too many rides that are. We're really committed to keeping that, so I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. That seems to be a good spot for us. We want more. Again, the goal there is to get more people on bikes in Iowa. Period. So that's where we're going to stick there for a while. And then I believe it's May 1st is the one-day passes. I think those close out. So yeah, very exciting to announce those dates, obviously. And those are traditional dates. There's nothing new. So April
Yeah.
1st is the date that we close out the week-long passes.
Okay, so everybody has until April 1st to get their
That's it.
registration into RAGBRAI. And what is the website for RAGBRAI?
It is ragbrai.com, RAGBRAI.com.
Easy enough. And how
Easy
about
enough.
your touring company? Do you have any contact information for that?
Oh, sure. The principal one is cyclechile.com. Yep.
Cool.
And that's fun.
Good.
Yep.
Well, Dieter, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm looking forward to an eventful and exciting July.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about bikes and RAGBRAI.
Well, that's it for this week. It was great talking to Dieter and learning a bit more about how RAGBRAI works. If by chance you plan to ride RAGBRAI, shoot me a message. I have a fun opportunity for you. For now, if you have a moment, please go to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe, rate, and review the Murphology Podcast. Also, check out murphologypodcast.com to find all kinds of great info. You can also email me your topic ideas at murphologypodcast@gmail.com. I will leave you with this quote from the Unwritten Book of Murphology. This quote comes from Joel Osteen. If you want to be happy, you have to be happy on purpose. When you wake up, you can't just wait to see what kind of day you'll have. You decide what kind of day you'll have. Think about it.